We've seen the power of water as it's controlled by dams. We've seen the power of a free-flowing river as it sweeps timbers and floats them downstream. And the amazing part of America's Industrial Revolution is the harnessing this raw energy by the many mills along the banks of America's rivers. Think about this for a moment. By 1880, there were more mills per river mile here in the Blackstone Valley than anywhere else in industrial of America. And yet the question is, how did the mills harness this raw energy? Well, fortunately, Jim Knott, president of the Riverdale Mill Complex here in Northbridge, Massachusetts, has been kind enough to invite us to his mill to look at water power and get an understanding of how this resource has been channeled and used today to drive his mills. But when Jim says come in the front door, he means the front door, the power trench. Let's go explore it.
In about the mid-1800s, a new mill was built here. It's up on Riverdale Street behind us, and they put in another one of the old-fashioned water wheels, and then a few years later, probably 40 or 50 years later, they switched to turbines. And the turbines that are in this mill, the one that I'm running to make electricity, was built in 1901, and it is exactly like turbines that are built today, and it is just as efficient as turbines that are built today. And underneath the Riverdale mills are some huge granite arches. They were made out of granite because it didn't know about concrete back in the mid-1800s. And what's happened is I'm doing some work on them. We've had to get up in there and replace some of the floors, which were made out of wood. There are 3 arches because there were 3 wheels at the Riverdale mills. I'm only using 1 now. But they used 3 because they would play the flow of the river. They had a 75 horse, a 100 horse, and a 200 horse, and I have the 200 horse restored and normally running when we have water coming through this area. When I first saw those arches, I stood there and I looked up at this huge granite arch and I said, where am I? I just couldn't imagine from what you see in this building out on the street that there could be such an infrastructure in underneath it. And I thought about the work that went into making these things. What they did was they constructed wooden forms that were in the shape of the arch. They put wedges under them, lifted them up, and placed these huge granite blocks up the form to the keystone in the middle. And when those blocks were in place, they were able to pull the wedges and move the form downstream. And you can see where each of these creations was done. I was really amazed at thinking of the labor that went into that and thinking what such an arch would cost today.
Here in the 1990s, you're still using electricity generated from water.
That's right, we sure are, and it is the least expensive electricity we can possibly get. We use a lot of electricity, and we're in a business that competes all around the world, and we can use that little extra savings in costs to permit us to ship materials around the world, which is what we do. One of the interesting things about the Blackstone River is that it's often referred to as the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and this river is called one of the most highly harnessed rivers in the United States. Now, what they mean by harnessing is As I mentioned, we put up a dam here, and there's another dam upstream and another one downstream. But those dams were placed so that the water from one did not interfere with the water from the other. And they were placed essentially at every place that they could be between here and the Narragansett Bay. The power is from gravity. It's the weight of the water falling. And what we have over here, just beyond the building, is the dam that was erected in the meadow on the Blackstone River back in the 1700s. And what that dam does is it holds the water back. And by holding the water back, you build up what is called a head of water. And then when you release that water, the weight of the falling water is what turns the water wheels, or in today's parlance, the water turbines. And we'll see one up here that'll give you an idea of what's happening. The water goes through this device that looks like a stirring device. It turns it. The energy is transmitted up into a gearbox, and from the gearbox it turns a generator. And that's how the electricity is made. The weight of the water of the Blackstone River falling in that turbine is what turns the generator and makes electricity. We've captured the energy of the river with mechanical and electrical devices.
It is rather amazing to think about that here we are in the 1990s using new technology to create lobster pots and other kind of innovative products, and yet we're still using a technology, water power, that's been in this country for over 200 years. As a mill owner and an entrepreneur here in the Blackstone Valley, how do you feel about being able to touch base with the early entrepreneurs of the valley?
I think it just makes a lot of sense. They did the right thing back then, and we're still doing it now. You mentioned the lobster traps, and that's an interesting comparison, because the lobster traps have been around for about 300 years. And for years and years and years, they were made out of wood. And they were a particular shape and size. And when I first got into the wire trap business, I was sure there was a better way to build a trap in terms of the shape and the size. And I made hundreds of different types of traps, and nothing worked better than those traps that had been around for 300 years.
So it's just the fact you had a different material that would last longer and take the use of the sea better than the wood.
That's right. That was the difference, really the only difference. Shape and size remains the same today as it did 300 years ago. Well, what I want to do, this was built about 150 years ago, and I want to make it last for another couple of hundred years. So what we're doing is we're using modern technology to hold those arches together and to replace those floors. And I'm convinced it'll be around for another 200 years.
The work in both the head race and the tail race for the Riverdale Mill has been completed, and the mill pond is back to its normal depth. Wintering waterfowl once again frequent the pond and river by the mill, and that complex relationship between man, technology, and nature continues to seek out a sustainable level of harmony.